cars didn't care about cornering. They didn't chase trends or beg for attention. But under all that metal, pure muscle. From heavyweight cruisers to oversized coupes with brutal engines. These are Detroit's biggest and baddest muscle cars. Number 15, 1970, Ford Mustang Boss 429. This wasn't a Mustang made for the street. It was a Mustang built to survive NASCAR. The 1970 Ford Mustang Boss 429 was never supposed to be a typical pony car. It was a homologation special. Ford needed to run its massive 429 cubic inch semi-Hemi V8 in NASCAR, but to meet the rules, they had to build road-legal versions. So they did the unthinkable, stuffed it into a Mustang shell. But fitting that beast under the hood wasn't easy. Ford had to send the cars to Carcraft, where the shock towers were widened and the engine bay was re-engineered just to make it work. That's how extreme this engine was. The factory rating was 375 horsepower, but with mild tuning, you were easily looking at 500 plus horsepower. This was a Corvette-crushing, Mopar-hunting monster. Quiet in appearance, terrifying in motion. Performance, 0 to 60 in the low 6 seconds. Quarter mile in 13.5 seconds. And that was stock. It came with a close ratio 4-speed manual, a 3.91 rear axle, beefed up suspension, Magnum 500 wheels, and one of the most aggressive hood scoops ever fitted to a production car. The scoop alone looked like it could eat Civics whole. Only about 300 were ever built, and each one was hand-assembled. It wasn't light, it wasn't nimble, but it was built for speed, violence, and domination. The Boss 429 wasn't about finesse, it was about force. A street car in name only, it was Ford's secret weapon in disguise. And we're only just getting started. Up next is Chrysler's idea of a land missile with enough torque to tow a city block. Number 14, 1970, Chrysler 300 Hurst Edition. You want big? This car was enormous, in size, torque, and presence. The 1970 Chrysler 300 Hurst was a limited production muscle yacht that blurred the line between luxury cruiser and brute force bruiser. Born from a collaboration with Hurst Performance, this wasn't your average street racer. It was a weaponized sofa built for grown men who wanted horsepower and leather seats. Under its massive hood sat a 440 cubic inch TNT V8, pushing out 375 horsepower and nearly 500 pound-feet of torque. That was enough to move its 4,200 pound body from 0 to 60 in just under 7 seconds. And this wasn't a chopped down coupe. It was over 18 feet long, had rear fender skirts, and looked like it belonged in a presidential motorcade. The hood and trunk were made of fiberglass to shave off weight, and every car came in white with gold Hurst stripes, hidden headlights, and a grille so wide it looked like it could inhale traffic. Inside it was full luxe, power everything, leather upholstery, wood grain accents, and a center console that looked like a command center. Subtle Hurst badging let the world know you meant business, if they even noticed it. Chrysler didn't make this for everyone. Only about 485 units were built, and they weren't advertised like Roadrunners or Super Bs. They were whispered about, fast, exclusive, and intimidating as hell. This wasn't a car you took to the drag strip every weekend. This was a car you drove fast in a straight line and dared anyone to pass you. It didn't carve corners, it crushed highways. A personal luxury car with a big mouth and bigger biceps. It was massive, bold, and brutally fast. But our next car takes it even further, by mixing brute force with absolute luxury. Number 13, 1973 Lincoln Continental Mark IV 460 V8. Muscle car? Not officially, but power, presence, size? Oh yeah, this one makes the list. The 1973 Lincoln Continental Mark IV was never sold as a performance car. But under that mile-long hood was a massive 460 cubic inch V8 pumping out 365 horsepower and over 500 pound-feet of torque. That's more torque than most Chevelles and Chargers were making by this point. It weighed well over 5,000 pounds. It took up entire lanes, but when it moved with force. It wasn't a drag strip killer, but it was a menace in its own lane. It was the car you bought when you wanted to flex without even touching the throttle. The styling was pure excess, opera windows, hidden headlights, chrome for days. But underneath all that class was Detroit's rawest ingredient, brutal V8 power. This car wasn't for burnouts. It was for commanding the road, making space, and letting everyone around you know you had nothing to prove, except weight, torque, and style. If muscle is about presence, this Lincoln had it in bulk. This Lincoln flexed without raising its voice. But Pontiac, they did it with style, swagger, and a whole lot of 455. Number 12, 1971, Pontiac Grand Prix SJ 455 HO. The Grand Prix SJ wasn't a muscle car in the traditional sense, but with the 455 high-output engine, it earned its place among the bad boys. In 1971, Pontiac took its classiest coupe and gave it serious muscle. They dropped in the 455 HO, an engine that made 335 net horsepower and a staggering 480 pound-feet of torque. It didn't scream off the line. It launched, smooth, brutal, and unstoppable. It came paired with a TH400 automatic transmission, a performance axle ratio, and heavy-duty suspension components designed to keep all that torque under control. Front disc brakes were standard, and with the SJ package, you got even more. Rally gauges, high-back bucket seats, a center console, and one of the most elegant interiors ever seen in a muscle-adjacent car. Despite its size and luxury leanings, the SJ could still do 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds and run the quarter mile in the high 14s. That's GTO territory, wrapped in chrome, leather, and executive-level swagger. What made the Grand Prix SJ special wasn't just its power, it was how effortlessly it delivered it. No stripes, no scoops, just raw V8 authority under a hood long enough to land a helicopter. It was a car for the guy who didn't want to prove anything, but could still dust your small block Camaro without even loosening his tie. This wasn't just a muscle car, it was a muscle statement. The Grand Prix SJ proved you didn't need flash to be feared. Just Pontiac's biggest engine and a long stretch of open road. Big engine, big body, and big attitude. But now let's go back to Chevrolet, to a full-size monster that had zero business being this quick. Number 11, 1967, Chevrolet Impala SS 427. Before it became a TV star, the Impala SS 427 was already a street legend, and it didn't need the spotlight to earn it. In 1967, Chevrolet gave buyers the chance to transform their full-size luxury coupe into a high-speed threat. The formula? Simple. Drop in the monstrous 427 cubic inch big block, rated at 385 horsepower and 460 pound-feet of torque, and let it breathe through dual exhausts. That turned this highway cruiser into a torque-loaded bullet. Despite weighing over 4,000 pounds, the SS 427 could go 0 to 60 in under 6.5 seconds and crack the quarter mile in the mid-14s, quicker than many smaller muscle cars of the day. You had the choice of a turbo 400 automatic or a 4-speed manual, and the chassis was upgraded with stiffer suspension and performance gearing. But the real magic was in its deception. It didn't wear stripes or wings, it wore chrome. The Impala SS 427 looked like something your dad would drive to a country club. But with a quick downshift, it could gap a GTO at a red light. The SS badging was minimal, the attitude wasn't. Inside, you got comfort, plush buckets, a full-length console, and a vibe that said, executive muscle. It didn't need to show off. It just needed to show up, and it delivered every time. The Impala SS 427 was a refined beast, a torque-rich sleeper hiding in plain sight. And today, it's one of the most criminally underrated full-size muscle cars GM ever built. Still watching? Then you're definitely one of us, someone who lives for the heavy hitters and forgotten monsters. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button and keep watching, because the next 5 are even meaner. Number 10, 1971 Oldsmobile 442 W30. This was Oldsmobile's mic drop moment. By 1971, emissions regulations, insurance premiums, and rising gas prices were putting muscle cars in a chokehold. But Oldsmobile wasn't done yet. They had one final trick up their finely tailored sleeve, the 442 W30. Stuffed with a 455 cubic inch big block V8, it made 350 net horsepower and a monstrous 500 pound-feet of torque, and that was the net number. The real figure? Significantly higher, especially with factory tuning and cold air induction. The W30 package wasn't just about raw numbers. It came with a fiberglass hood featuring functional scoops, an aluminum intake manifold, a hotter cam, and a tuned quadrajet carb. You could get it with a 4-speed Muncie manual and a 3.91 limited slip rear. The suspension was beefed up with stiffer springs, better shocks, and sway bars that actually worked. It wasn't trying to be a Camaro or a Mustang. It wasn't screaming for attention. It was mature muscle, subtle, confident, and capable of turning a quarter mile in the low 14s with the windows rolled up and the AC blowing cold. There were no flashy stripes, no outrageous wings, just a clean body, bold stance, and a thunderous exhaust note that let you know it meant business. It didn't care about showing off, it cared about showing up. To collectors, it's a gem. To the average driver back then, it was just another Oldsmobile. That's exactly what made it dangerous. The 1971 442 W30 was Oldsmobile's final stand in the muscle car war, and it landed like a hammer. And while Olds was all business, AMC decided to get weird, with a wild card built like a tank. Number 9, 1971 AMC Matador machine, 390 V8 prototype. This one never made it to full production, but the legend is real. In 1971, AMC flirted with turning the full-size Matador into a factory street fighter. The plan? Take the Matador coupe, add the machine performance trim, and stuff in their beefy 390 V8 rated at 340 horsepower. What they built was a wide-shouldered fastback brute that looked like it came off a drag strip and into a police chase. The Matador machine concept had rally stripes, Magnum 500 wheels, bucket seats, a Ram air hood, and, most importantly, muscle where it counted. 0 to 60 in around 6.5 seconds. Quarter mile in the high 14s. Not bad for something built off AMC's full-size platform. It had the torque, the gear ratios, and the looks to back it all up. But for some reason, AMC pulled the plug. The Javelin AMX survived. The Matador machine didn't. Only a few pre-production units were made, some for press, others for display. But the ones that slipped out? Instant legends. The Matador machine was AMC going full send on attitude. And even if it was a one-hit wonder, it left a scar. Now let's get back to the cars that did make it, starting with Mercury's nastiest surprise. Number 8, 1970, Mercury Cyclone Spoiler 429 CJ. Mercury never got the credit it deserved in the muscle car wars, but the 1970 Cyclone Spoiler 429 CJ didn't care one bit. This wasn't a rebadged Mustang or a style-over-speed cruiser. It was a full-on torque monster, hiding Ford's brawniest big block, the 429 Cobra Jet V8, beneath one of the angriest hoods ever to come out of Dearborn. On paper, it made 370 horsepower and over 450 pound-feet of torque, but real-world numbers felt even nastier. This thing could launch from 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds and rip through the quarter mile in the low 14s. And that's in a car with enough sheet metal to start its own orbit. It came standard with a 4-speed manual transmission, a 3.91 traction lock rear, and Ford's competition suspension, which made it surprisingly composed on straightaways and wild in the corners.
A couple of years back, but this is the first time I've seen your car.
The body was something else entirely. Long, wide, and shaped like it had been wind-tested by Thor. It had a shaker scoop, bold rear spoiler, deep front grille, and enough presence to stop traffic cold. This car didn't whisper potential, it screamed move. Unlike the Mustangs and Torinos, the Cyclone spoiler didn't pretend to be friendly. It wasn't built for attention. It was built to bully its way through air, rubber, and rivals. It was one of the boldest Mercury designs ever, and very few people noticed. That's what makes it special. Today, the Cyclone Spoiler 429 CJ is one of the rarest Mercury muscle cars in existence. Overshadowed? Yes. Undervalued? Absolutely. But forgotten? Not here. This car was Mercury's moment to growl, and it left claw marks in its lane. But if you thought Mercury was aggressive, wait till you meet Dodge at its most unapologetic. Number 7, 1973, Dodge Charger, SE 400 Magnum. By 1973, the muscle car era was running on fumes, insurance rates were sky high, emissions laws were tightening, and gas prices were climbing. But Dodge wasn't ready to let go. Enter the 1973 Dodge Charger SE 400 Magnum, a full-size brawler in a velvet tracksuit. Under the hood sat a 400 cubic inch big block V8, pushing 280 net horsepower and 375 pound-feet of torque. On paper, it didn't look like a monster, but in the real world, it still packed a nasty punch. 0 to 60 came in around 7 seconds, and it could run the quarter mile in the mid-15s, respectable for something that weighed nearly 2 tons and looked like a bank vault on wheels. The SE trim gave it upscale attitude, hidden headlights, a padded vinyl roof, deep dish rally wheels, and an interior that wouldn't feel out of place in a Chrysler New Yorker. Bucket seats, wood grain accents, and a full-gauge cluster added to the luxury feel. But make no mistake, this was still Mopar muscle under all that polish. It came with dual exhaust, a 4-barrel carb, and heavy-duty suspension options. It didn't just cruise, it rumbled, gliding down the highway with the kind of confidence only Detroit iron could deliver. It wasn't built to handle corners, it was built to own lanes. The 73 Charger SE 400 was Mopar's attempt to blend brute force with grown-up style, a muscle car that had traded its racing jacket for a tailored blazer, but hadn't forgotten how to throw a punch. The Charger came dressed for dinner, but still knew how to brawl. But before Mopar ruled the streets, Pontiac had already built a heavyweight that didn't need stripes or scoops to scare the hell out of you. Number 6, 1969, Pontiac Catalina 428 HO. This wasn't your average grandpa cruiser. The 1969 Pontiac Catalina 428 high output was one of those rare full-size machines that looked like a country club cruiser, but drove like a street brawler. Under the hood was a 428 cubic inch V8 rated at 390 horsepower and 465 pound-feet of torque. It came with big valve heads, a hotter camshaft, and a Rochester quadrajet carb that delivered crisp throttle response, even in a car that weighed over 4,000 pounds. This thing wasn't built to be delicate, it was built to dominate. Performance? Try 0 to 60 in under 6.5 seconds, and a quarter mile in the high 13s. That's serious muscle, especially for something that looked more at home at a Rotary Club luncheon than a drag strip showdown. Pontiac gave buyers real options too. You could spec a turbo 400 automatic, limited slip differential, dual exhaust, heavy-duty suspension, and rally gauges, all of which turned this big body boat into a full-size GTO sleeper. And because the Catalina 428 HO wasn't part of GM's big marketing push, it stayed low profile, known only by those who truly knew what to look for. It had presence, it had poise, and it had the power to embarrass smaller muscle cars without ever breaking a sweat. No stripes, no decals, no screaming paint jobs, just a clean body, a wide stance, and the ability to leave you behind with a slight growl and a twitch of the rear wheels. This car was a gentle giant with a mean streak, the kind of Pontiac that didn't need to show off. It just needed a green light. If you've made it this far, you already know these cars aren't for everyone. So hit that subscribe button now, because the last 5, they're louder, rarer, and downright unhinged. For our number 5 spot, a Ford so big, they had to name it after a weapon. Number 5, 1971 Ford Torino Cobra 429 Super Cobra Jet. This was the Ford you didn't want to pull up next to. The 1971 Torino Cobra with the 429 Super Cobra Jet wasn't just muscle, it was a ballistic missile with a license plate. Under the hood sat Ford's 429 cubic inch SCJ big block, rated at 375 gross horsepower. But real-world output was much higher. It featured solid lifters, forged internals, a big Holley 780 carb, and optional 4.11 gears that turned this fastback into a street-legal drag car. It launched hard, roared loud, and covered the quarter mile in the low 13s. No power steering, no AC, just horsepower and fury. The Torino Cobra didn't get the glamour of the Mustang, but it was leaner, more menacing, and purpose-built for straight-line dominance. It had a wide stance, fastback profile, and just enough aggressive detailing to make you take a second look. You could option it with a drag pack, oil cooler, hearse shifter, and functional ram air. It wasn't pretty, it was pissed off, and that's why it mattered. The SCJ Torino was Detroit muscle at its angriest, loud, raw, and ready to throw hands at every red light. But if Ford's Street Fighter brought fists, Chevy was about to bring a hammer. Number 4, 1970, Chevrolet Chevelle SS 454 LS6. This is the car that made the phrase peak muscle feel like an understatement. The 1970 Chevelle SS 454 LS6 wasn't just fast, it was the most powerful production muscle car you could buy at the time. With 450 horsepower and a monstrous 500 pound-feet of torque, straight from the factory, it turned highways into drag strips and rear tires into smoke machines. This wasn't a small block street car. It was built to be violent. The LS6 454 came with a high-lift solid camshaft, forged pistons, a Holley 4-barrel carb, aluminum intake, and enough compression to make premium fuel sweat. It could blast 0 to 60 in just over 5 seconds and cover the quarter mile in the mid-12s on bias ply tires. Visually, it looked as mean as it sounded. You could pair it with cowl induction, dual SS stripes, hood pins, and the iconic 5-spoke SS wheels. But even when ordered bare bones, the LS6 had presence. And when it pulled up beside you, you knew exactly what it was. Only around 4,400 LS6 Chevelles were ever built, making them rare, loud, and legendary. They weren't cheap then, and they're worth a fortune now. This was Chevrolet unchained, unfiltered, and completely unapologetic. It wasn't built to impress accountants or marketing teams. It was built to crush the guy next to you, no matter what he was driving. And while the Chevelle took the spotlight, Buick was doing something even more savage, without the flash. Number 3, 1970 Buick GSX Stage 1 455. You wouldn't expect the baddest car on the block to wear a Buick badge. But in 1970, that's exactly what happened. The Buick GSX Stage 1 wasn't loud about what it could do, but once you heard it fire up, the conversation changed. Underneath the Saturn Yellow or Apollo White paint was a 455 cubic inch V8 producing a claimed 360 horsepower and an earth-shifting 510 pound-feet of torque, the highest of any American production car at the time. Let that sink in. More torque than the LS6 Chevelle, more than the 426 Hemi, more than anything. The GSX Stage 1 was more than just muscle. It was muscle in a tuxedo. You got bucket seats, a center console, full gauges, and a ride smoother than almost any other car in its class. But make no mistake, when you dropped the hammer, this thing moved. It ran mid-13s in the quarter mile and could hang with, or beat, the biggest names in the game. The hood tack, rear spoiler, and blacked-out grille gave it some flair, but not enough to tip off the average driver that this wasn't just a flashy coupe. And that was the genius of the GSX. It didn't need to scream, it just showed up and handled business. Today, it stands as one of the most underrated but overperforming muscle cars ever made. It didn't beg for respect, it took it. Coming up next, a Mopar Brute with 6 barrels, 1 purpose, and no patience. Number 2, 1971, Plymouth GTX 446 barrel. The GTX was Plymouth's gentleman's muscle car, but with the 446 barrel, it stopped being polite and started throwing punches. In 1971, Plymouth gave the GTX its final big shot of adrenaline. Under the hood, the legendary 440 cubic inch V8 with 3 2-barrel carbs, delivering 385 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque. It wasn't just big, it was relentless. With the air grabber hood scoop engaged and the carbs roaring in sequence, The GTX could sprint to 60 in 5.7 seconds and rip through the quarter mile in 13.7. This was no stripped-out drag car either. It came loaded, wood grain trim, bucket seats, rally dash, chrome everywhere. It was refined chaos. The 1971 model brought a new fuselage body, swooping lines, Coke bottle curves, and wide stance. It looked heavier than it was. But with the 6-barrel setup and optional track pack, which included a 3.54 Dana 60 rear and sure grip diff, it moved like something much smaller. The GTX was often overshadowed by the Roadrunner and the Cuda, but this thing was arguably Mopar's most complete package: speed, luxury, and unfiltered aggression. And because it wasn't overproduced, it's rare, especially in 6-barrel trim. The 440 plus 6 GTX wasn't loud by design, but when it lit up the street, everyone paid attention. Still, there was one car that wore its menace even more proudly. And it's coming up next as our #1 top pick of Detroit's biggest and baddest muscle cars. Number 1, 1970, Dodge Charger RT 440 6-pack. If muscle cars had a final boss, this was it. The 1970 Dodge Charger RT with the 440 6-pack was the ultimate combination of style, power, and sheer street presence. It didn't need to be the fastest, though it came damn close. It just needed to be the baddest. And it was. Under the hood was the 440 Ci V8 with 3 Holley 2-barrel carbs, rated at 390 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque. It hit 0 to 60 in around 5.6 seconds and laid down quarter miles in the low 13s. But stats don't tell the full story. The Charger RT was wide, long, low. It had the infamous Coke bottle shape, hidden headlights, and one of the most aggressive grills ever put on a production car. Option the Super Track pack, and you'd get a 4.10 Dana 60 rear, Hemi suspension upgrades, and a Hurst-shifted 4-speed that barked with every gear. Inside, it was part luxury cruiser, part muscle cockpit. Bucket seats, wood grain, pistol grip shifter, rally dash. Everything said you were driving something serious. And when that 6-pack opened up, it didn't just accelerate, it lunged. The induction howl, the body twist, the way it shoved your spine into the seat, it was unforgettable. The Charger RT 440 6-pack didn't pretend to be balanced. It was a middle finger on wheels, aimed at anyone who thought they had the fastest car in town. It closed out the golden era of muscle the way it should have. Loud, lethal, and legendary. And that's it. 15 of the biggest, loudest, and most brutal muscle cars ever built in Detroit. No lightweight challengers, no polished showpieces, just iron giants with engines that roared louder than their reputations. Which one would you want parked in your garage? Drop your pick in the comments and let us know which heavyweight muscle car we should feature next. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. We've got more underrated beasts, forbidden classics, and factory freaks coming your way every single week. Thanks for watching.